Welcome to the Westport Library. Today's program will begin momentarily. Supported by Verso Studios, created locally and shared with the world.
Hello, and thank you for coming to the Westport Library's AI and Us, a Civic Symposium. My name is Joanne Connon, and I'm also a member of the program team here at the library and the organizer of this event for Verso University, the library's lifelong learning and education initiative. Today was designed for accelerationists, those eager to push technology forward and see where it takes us, and the decelerationist, who might prefer that we tap the brakes a bit and think a little more about where we're headed. And for the rest of us, who are traveling somewhere along that shifting spectrum, hopefully our goal today isn't to take sides necessarily, but to listen, question, and imagine what a thoughtful path forward might look like. I'm deeply proud to be part of a community that values learning, open dialogue, and the willingness to engage. Throughout the afternoon, you'll hear from a variety of people, each bringing a different perspective, from technology, law, and business to medicine, government, and education, and each offering a distinct point of view shaped by their field, their experience, and their hopes for the future. Our first guest is Kevin Nguyen, novelist and features editor at the technology news and media network, The Verge. Critics have lauded Kevin's 2025 novel, My Documents, for its sharp satire and timely exploration of contemporary issues. You may have seen the novel's overwhelmingly positive New York Times book review in May. Kevin will interview our special opening keynote guest, Scott Shapiro, a professor of law and philosophy at Yale Law School, where his scholarship spans the philosophy of law, international and criminal law, cybersecurity, and artificial intelligence, and where he co-founded the Yale Legal AI Lab, focused on the automation of legal reasoning. From 2024 to 2025, he was Special Assistant for AI Ethics to the Chief AI Officer at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency within the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. He is also the author of Fancy Bear Goes Phishing, Phishing with a PH, The Dark History of the Information Age, and 5 Extraordinary Hacks. Both authors will be signing copies of their books that will be for sale following the conversation. Please join me in welcoming Kevin Nguyen and Professor Scott Shapiro to the forum stage.
Good morning. It was loud.
Good morning.
Yeah, let's just start with the basics. When we talk about AI, what are we even talking about?
Yeah, that's a great question. What is AI? So the stupid answer, well, it's, artificial intelligence. So what's that? That's whatever intelligence is, and I won't get into a long philosophical discussion about that, like the ability to solve complex problems in changing environments, let's call it that. And what's interesting about AI is that as opposed to natural selection, human beings have built it. It's artificial in the sense that it's the result of an artifice, a machine. And that's really fascinating, that machines can think, and that's fascinating. But the more helpful distinction is between two kinds of artificial intelligence. So the first kind of artificial intelligence is typically called symbolic AI. Classical AI. When I was in the 1980s, when I was a student, I took a class in artificial intelligence, and it was symbolic AI. What's symbolic AI? It's where information and knowledge is represented explicitly by letters, like P, Q, R, like in math, and the knowledge and information is derived from these symbols through logical rules. It's kind of like a calculator, but for knowledge. And it worked perfectly 1% of the time and just didn't do anything 99% of the time, which was a bummer. Like I took it when I was in, it was like exciting in the 1980s. Wow, artificial intelligence, and it did nothing. And then,
I guess, sorry, why did it only work 1% of the time?
Oh, because, so you could explicitly encode knowledge, but you had to ask it in a very particular way. It was very brittle. So if you asked it a slightly different way, you wouldn't trigger the rule. And so if you asked it perfectly, you'd get the answer. But if you asked it even slightly differently, it would just glitch out on you, okay? So, which was 99% of the time, right? And then you have this other thing called connectionist AI or neural nets. And the idea there is that instead of modeling the intelligence like a calculator, you model it like the brain. And in the brain, the theory is that knowledge is represented not explicitly, but kind of distributed across the billions and billions of neurons in our head. And so what connectionist AI does is it makes these artificial neurons, and it trains them much in the way in which natural selection might train animals, or a teacher might train a student. Now, the great thing about connectionist AI, and all of us probably have interacted with connectionist AI when you use your phone for face recognition, ChatGPT, all that kind of stuff. That's connectionist AI. And the thing about connectionist AI is it works 99% of the time, and pretty well, not perfectly, and 1% of the time disastrously. And so the trick is, how do you take this thing that works perfectly some of the time, and this thing that works pretty well but not perfectly most of the time and disastrously some of the time, how do you merge those two things together? And that's the type of AI you'll hear a lot more about going forward, I believe. It's called neurosymbolic AI, which is the combination of the two to make sure that what the neural net produces is acceptable according to some kinds of logical rules.
I'm really excited to talk to you because I think for a lot of us, we've been thinking about AI honestly just in the past few years. I don't think 5 years ago there would have been an AI symposium that this many people would show up to at the Westport Library. But you've been thinking about it for 4 decades, so you have kind of a historical view of it. I have a million questions for you. I do want to say we'll open up to questions around 1 o'clock, so think about your questions now, and you'll be able to approach the mic. I'll signal you guys. And I think my one word I think questions should be questions. If you have comments, you can talk to Scott later when you're signing a book. But yeah, I guess back to what I was saying, we've been thinking about it kind of in the short term. We've been thinking about that latter definition you've been talking about. What happened to the first one? What happened to symbolic AI?
Yeah, so interestingly, the Yale Computer Science Department was the #1 computer science department in the country, arguably, in the 1980s and the 1990s, because they specialized in symbolic AI. And then there were the upstarts, the ones who thought, this is not going to work. What we want is something that works like the brain. And so this became a vicious, vicious fight within the AI community. And Yale Computer Science has only very recently kind of gotten out of this problem. So what happened to symbolic AI was that since you could there were all the 99% of things that you wanted to do that you couldn't do, people would like, we'll take some mistakes as long as it works really well on the other kinds of cases. And so then all the money left symbolic AI and went to neural nets in the late 1990s, early 2000s. And then it left. And it went back to symbolic AI for a bit, and then it went back again. And now we're in the like, away from symbolic AI. But it still exists, and you use it every day, you just don't know it. What do I mean? So I have to worry about this all the time because I teach younger people. I would just say, I'm sorry, I want to say this properly, more junior people, okay? The thing about for those of us who are more senior, we remember that like in the 2000s, remember your computer always crashed? Always, always. We got always the blue screen of death. Why? We got it because Microsoft didn't own the hardware stack like Apple does. And so when you got a new printer, you got a new monitor, you had to install this thing called a driver. But the driver was a piece of software, and it would be written in some place in the world, and you would get it, and you would install it, and it would have bugs or malware, and it would just destroy everything. Around 2004, Microsoft thought, wait a second, why can't we just take these programs and check them for errors? Hence, the App Store was born. And the idea of an app store, why is there an app store? There's an app store because the apps that you buy, you want to make sure that when you download them to your phone or to your computer, they don't give you the blue screen of death. Why don't they do that? Well, in part because what Apple or Google or any people who have app stores, they put these through theorem provers. A theorem prover is a kind of artificial intelligence program that can solve logic puzzles. And it turns out that a computer program is a gigantic logic statement. And people started, like Apple, like Microsoft, they started taking programs and they started giving it to this AI which operated on the basis of logic and explicit representation. And you know what? That worked unbelievably well. And so when you turn on your computer or your phone, you are using the results of AI, classical AI, symbolic AI, that works unbelievably brilliantly and checks everything. We don't call that AI now because that's not where all the money is, because this problem, at least this problem has been solved. So we don't talk about it.
And so why is all the money in the other form of AI now?
Yeah, because it's really, really hard to generate a really cute cat from a theorem prover. Like, what do you want? I mean, what do human beings want?
Cat photos.
Yeah, cat photos, of course. I don't want to insult everyone. They all know cat photos is what everyone wants. But one of the things that I talk about in Fancy Bear Goes Phishing was that when the internet started becoming a commercially viable enterprise, people wanted to know, what will people use the internet for? And you know what people want to do more than anything? Talk. And so chat rooms and email and the ability to communicate with other human beings is the thing that human beings wanted to do. And so that's why social media took off. And ultimately, why did AI take off? Because of this thing called a chat bot. We love talking. My colleague Carol Rose used to say that this was true of academics, but I think it may be true of many people. She'd say academics are in two states, talking or waiting to talk. And that is, I would just say from an N of one, yes, that is true. And I think that the ability to ask questions and get these really intelligent responses, and you can keep on talking to it and it will respond instead of saying, I really have to go now. This is incredibly exciting.
I think there's like a large agreement that like this AI boom really starts, this current one that we're kind of fixated on, where all the money is coming from, comes after the launch of ChatGPT 3 from a startup, a formerly nonprofit called OpenAI. I guess, what was the big leap there? I mean, you've been talking and thinking about AI on a pretty deep level for 4 decades, and suddenly this thing emerges that on its face feels quite magical. Like, what has happened there? Like, what caused that leap forward?
Yeah, so I can, you can answer this in various levels. I would say the first thing that I think surprised so many people, surprised researchers, surprised people who have been following this, is that it turned out that if you trained a certain kind of AI model on enormous amount of text, and by the way, what does it mean to train an AI model? And how do you train it on text? Let me just, should I take a second? Just
take a second.
Like, because it's like all, I don't know, it's all mysterious. So let me just explain to you how it's done. So, I mean, I'm simplifying a bit, but not actually that much. Okay, so the way a large language model, what is a large language model? Let's just talk about.
Start there.
Okay, what's a model? Okay, a model is just something that says what's the likelihood of a certain word appearing. So that's all it is. It just assigns probabilities to words, okay? And a language model, a model is something that assigns probabilities to something. A language model is a model that assigns probabilities to language. A large language model is a model that has been trained on enormous amounts of language so that its probabilities are very accurate. So how do you train a large language model? So let's say you give it the phrase, the cat is on the mat. This is how you train it. You go, the blank is on the mat. Now guess. And if it says the shoe is on the mat, you're like, that's not a great answer. You know, so you kind of adjust the model a little bit, and then you try it again. And it says the dog is on the mat. And you're like, oh, that's much better, but still not quite right. And of course, like the most likely answer is the cat is on the mat if you go through like all of human writing, okay? So right now, large language models are trained roughly on 10 trillion tokens or word-like entities. And so I think what people were extremely surprised about was that if you did this at a huge scale, you would start getting what people call emergent properties, things that you didn't expect that were genuinely surprising. That then led people to think, if we just keep on throwing more and more things at it, it's gonna just get smarter and smarter and smarter. And 2 things happened. One is we ran out of words, okay, was one thing.
I mean, we fed the entirety of everything that's ever been written by human beings, more or less, to these models.
Right, and still it says, kind of, it still makes mistakes. And that's kind of surprising. for those of us who had been following this for a long time, we thought, it's unbelievable that this can do, that if you train a large language model on this amount of text, it's gonna have incredibly good outputs. But it's never gonna be truly reasoning because it doesn't work that way. Because what's a large language model trying to do? It's trying to guess. So when it sees 2 + 2 = 4, it's not calculating 2 + 2 = 4. It's like, what pattern best fits 2 + 2 = blank? So if you know that these models are pattern matchers rather than calculators, you don't think they're ever gonna really calculate. And so it's not surprising that they ran out of ability to be really, really, really intelligent.
It's kind of interesting what you're saying. I think maybe this is like a common misconception that like AI as we know it, large language models as we know it, it's actually like a really simple and straightforward idea just at like a massive scale, right? It's not a complicated thing, it's actually a simple thing.
Yes, so it's an analogy that's used all the time. I'm gonna use it again because it really is true, which is that, you know, when you type into a search bar and you say, where is, and it'll complete things for you. It's auto-completes it. That's what a large language model is, just on a vast scale. And it's very simple. The big technical advance was something called the transformer. And the transformer is a kind of very kind of complicated device for doing matrix multiplication. And this paper was published in 2017. And GPT, as in GPT 3, 4, 5, that stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformers. So there was this big technical advance made by Google in 2017. People ran with it. And you're right, it's very simple, though actually getting it to work can be kind of fiddly sometimes.
I think a lot of people here, it's hard to gauge like the enthusiasm around AI in a crowd, but I know some people are quite excited about it, some people are very skeptical about it, some people I think are even scared of it. These all seem like fair responses. I guess, where are you on this spectrum?
I could not be more excited. I might even explode. I honestly believe, I can't believe I was born now. That's how I feel. So there's a little kid part of me that loves playing with these things. So there's that high-minded idea. But the second thing is that, gosh, there's so many things you could do with it to help people. Everyone focuses on the way in which it can harm people. And I think, wow, there are all these ways that it can help people. So what we do at the Yale Legal AI Lab is we design tools that are neurosymbolic, that combine connectionist neural nets with symbolic classical AI to create answers to questions that are not hallucinatory, that are correct. And this has enormous implications for the access to justice problem in the United States. People say to me, Scott, you teach, you're teaching in a law school all about how to automate legal reasoning. Aren't you worried that you're going to put your students out of a job? And I say, you're assuming that 99.99% of Americans have access to lawyers. They don't. There's a terrible, terrible problem in the United States that the rules are just too complicated, there's nobody to help, and the tools that exist right now are not accurate.
I guess to talk about AI more broadly and kind of take the skeptic's view here, I think providing legal access to those who can't ordinarily afford it sounds like a very, like, I can get behind that use of AI. I think, as far as I know, you haven't taken $1 trillion in venture capital funding. The companies that have, you know, they're selling $200 a month subscriptions to chatbots. So I wonder, do you think a lot of the skepticism comes from maybe the marketing they hear or the big players in it who have maybe slightly different and less wholesome incentives?
Yeah, I mean, so what's the anxiety? The anxiety is so multi-layered. So first is, how does it work? Like, it's just like, it really feels like magic, and that's scary when you don't know how something works. And it really is very new, like it was invented on Tuesday. And so none of us, well, not none of us, but most of us don't really know what it is. Number two, we're told that it's coming for our jobs. And that's super duper scary. Not only that, but some of us are saying that it's going to destroy the human race. Also scary. And so you combine kind of genuine ignorance. I mean, ignorance not in a bad sense, but like, you know, because how are you supposed to learn about this stuff, right? Yeah, I mean, partly.
You have to come to the Westport Library.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Right. What do people do who don't live in Westport, right? So the first thing is that people don't understand it. Number two, the economic uncertainty. It's coming for my job. That's really scary. And number three is the fact that people say that it can destroy us and our children and our grandchildren and destroy the world. Well, how are you not supposed to be anxious about that?
I wanted to ask about the labor part first, but I do feel like now that you have like the existential world-ending scenario out there, we should probably address that first. Doesn't matter if we have jobs if the Earth doesn't exist. How much are you thinking about that, and then how well-founded do you think those fears are?
Gosh, it's such a great question, and I don't even know how to assess the risk. So so what's the worry? The worry is that as we build and improve upon artificial intelligence, we may hit something called artificial general intelligence. That is, AIs that are smart as human beings. Then we're going to get to this next stage, which is superintelligence, which is smarter than human beings. We already have some forms of superintelligence, right? I mean, a chatbot, like nobody can respond like a chatbot now. I mean, that's superhuman. And so the worry is that we're going to create super intelligent agents who are going to kind of realize that, like, we're in the way. And that's like super scary because we know of instances where LLMs will lie, models will lie to their users to make them use them more. And then it becomes a competition between us and them. That's the way in which it's portrayed. My sense is it's not going to be like that.
So it's not going to be like Terminator.
No, it's not going to be like Terminator, okay? One of the things is that I think that the idea that it's going to be them against us maybe is not right. I think it's going to be our AIs against the other countries' AIs. Like, it's not clear to me that, like, AIs are going to think that they have something in common. Right? Like, it's probably that, like, my AIs are going to see that their energy depends on me, not on other AIs. So I don't know.
This outcome doesn't sound that much better than Terminator.
I guess I would say, like, we can talk about a world in which this doesn't happen, but this is a world in which it's happening. Like, you're not putting the genie back in the bottle. And so the trick is to figure out try to predict the problems and then see if you can address them at the beginning. We have a long history. I mean, I wrote a book about a Fancy Bear Goes Phishing, which is all about the problems that arise when this new technology, the internet, came about. And we have a good 70 years of experience dealing with cybersecurity, dealing with the internet, and what can we learn from that? That's what I focus on.
I guess, what would you say to someone that, there's a possibility of this world-ending outcome? Why wouldn't we just pump the brakes? Do you just feel like that's impossible?
Oh, it's first of all, it's just economically impossible because the American economy depends on it. I mean, this is another conversation, but we're at a kind of almost too big to fail point with AI companies. You'll see this discussion in the press now about.
Yeah, I think the Wall Street Journal calculated that 40% of our GDP growth is entirely from AI companies. NVIDIA, the chip maker, is the biggest company in the world now, just in terms of monetary value. Isn't that kind of scary too? I mean, too big to fail. I mean, we could just fail very bigly.
Yeah, right. Excellent. Yes, so I would say there's no question. So one thing is, can we stop it? We can't stop it if everyone's betting on it. That's the first thing. There's just no way through it, okay? But number two is, why should there be? Again, every tool can be used for good or it could be used for evil. And what we should be thinking about is, how do we identify the good use cases and try to prevent the bad use cases? Our big problem right now is we have not yet figured out how any of us want to use AI. And so it's very hard to figure out how to regulate something that none of us know what to do with it. That doesn't mean that we have to sit on our hands and we can just start building things and throwing them out and just see what happens.
I feel like that's a little bit of what's happening, though, no?
Oh, 100%. 100%. That's exactly what's happening. Because that's always what happens. When there's money, and there's money to be made by releasing it, and there's no legal liability associated with doing it ahead of time, it's gonna happen. One of the things that you learn either from being a law professor or just being a human being on the planet is that if people are not forced to internalize their costs, they're not. They're gonna externalize them onto us. And that's what's happening. That doesn't mean that, we shouldn't complain about it. Of course, we should complain about it. But one of the things that, if anything, I have a pet peeve about is so many scholars spend their time talking about AI and the risks and not enough time trying to build tools that don't have those risks. They just leave it up to the big labs to do it. And I think that that's just an enormous wasted opportunity.
You mentioned earlier you wanted to build this tool that avoids hallucinations. I think, do we define hallucinations?
Yeah, so it's hard to say what a hallucination is, but let's just, the technical thing is technical answer is where if you give it text that's not like the text you trained it on, it will give you bad answers because it wasn't trained on that, okay? Just like if you ask somebody who only took modern literature courses about Beowulf, and you force them to say something, they'd probably make something up, and it would be like it would sound plausible, but it would not be. And so I think of hallucinations as plausible sounding mistakes.
It's a little bit different and a little more intense than just like getting something wrong, right?
Yes, it's getting something wrong that seems right.
It's confidently wrong.
Yes, that is the big problem. The big problem is that it looks right. And the fact that it looks right is so confusing. It's optimized. The point of a chatbot is not to get the right answer. It's to mimic what a 21st century person who is writing something on a website would say. Now, why did I just say that? Because that's where they're getting their text from to train. They're getting that from websites. You know, so the original LLMs were trained on Reddit. And that's why Microsoft, when they trained their models on Reddit, would start like out of the gate, like being Nazis, you know, because it's trained on like more extreme speech.
This is why you shouldn't ask ChatGPT for dating advice.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Yeah, no, yeah, that was my mistake. Okay. What I would say is that what we ought to be doing is thinking about all the ways in which we can improve people's lives through this technology, as opposed to just taking it on faith that the kinds of products we see are the right kinds of products. Now, I'm not saying that people out here should be building them, although you can now. By the way, so I took time off from like doing AI stuff. I wrote different books and stuff like that. I learned AI really quickly, like about 2.5 years ago. How? Using AI. What did I do? I would read papers and I would get stuck, like, you know, by the third sentence, and I would just cut and paste. And they put it in there and they said, explain this to me. And explain it, and it wouldn't be, and I would say, pretend I'm in high school. Explain it to me like I'm in high school. There is no better tutor on something real than a chatbot. It's brilliant. I will spend, so maybe some people like fall in love with their chatbot.
Don't do that, yeah.
Yeah, I spend a good, like maybe an hour, 2 hours on the weekend just talking to it, like asking it questions about things I'm interested in, like tell me about the lambda calculus. And so if you want to know about things, talk to your phone. I mean, it's really quite brilliant. And if something it says doesn't make sense, say, wait a second, you just said this, but now you said this. Is that right? And sometimes it'll say, no, those are consistent. Sometimes it'll say, you're right. Good catch.
Actually, I kind of want to poll the audience here. How many people have tried messing around with the chatbot or use it regularly? That's nearly everybody.
Yeah. Do you, okay, how many like it? Okay, so yeah.
Three quarters? Yeah.
Yeah, 3/4 and a couple people who didn't want to admit it. Yeah.
Well, they're in love with theirs.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to go back to your project. So I think everyone here has used it, is aware that sometimes chatbots hallucinate, that you must verify certain things that are important yourself, but you know, in most cases it works pretty well. How are you developing something that doesn't hallucinate?
Yeah, so thank you. So one thing I would say, so I work on using AI for law, okay, especially legal reasoning. I'm a law professor, so what I focus on, like what I think about. I teach human beings about legal reasoning, and thought, can I do that for AI? Now, the trick is to realize there's not only one kind of legal reasoning. There's many kinds of legal reasoning, but in a very kind of crude sense, let me distinguish between two main ways of reasoning about the law. One is I would call rule-based reasoning. So you have something, you're looking at your lease, and you want to know, like, what are you allowed to do? When can you terminate your lease? You're working in an industry, and you're the compliance officer, and you have to see, did we do this according to the statutes? You're HR, and you have to look at the HR handbook to see, when can somebody take a leave, or any kind of thing where there's just lots of rules. Then there's this other kind of legal reasoning, which is not rule-based at all. It's case-based. So the kind of stuff that you read in the newspaper about what the Supreme Court is considering. Those are not like rules like you would find in an HR handbook or in the statute books, but they're like vignettes, stories about people who did things. They didn't shovel their sidewalk and somebody came, slipped and fell and broke their knee. Are they responsible? And so in case-based reasoning, you have lots and lots and lots of cases, and you want to figure out how do you decide the next case. These are very different kinds of ways of thinking. So we build different kinds of tools for different kinds of reasoning. So let me tell you for the rule-based. If you ever have dealt with a set of rules, like you could go out of your mind. They're so complicated, they're really hard to follow. Heaven forbid there should be like a chart.
Just all the rules.
Yeah, right. Like you put your finger here and then you go like this. I mean, it's just very hard to do. So what we do is we take large language models and we actually take the legal codes and we translate them into math. We translate them into what's called first-order logic. So if you took ever a logic course in college or in high school, that's what we use. And remember I talked to you about earlier about like these theorem provers that solved our problem of the blue screen of death.
This is symbolic AI.
This is symbolic AI, exactly. What we do is we use the connectionist neural nets to translate legal codes into a kind of language that the computer can understand. And then we give it to these theorem provers, which are calculators, essentially calculators. They can handle terabytes worth of premises, and they will always give you the right answer. Not only that, but they'll tell you why it was the right answer. So what we do is we take legal codes and we feed it into our system. It generates this set of rules that obeys logic, and it acts like a calculator as opposed to a guessing machine. And so if your work in, let's say, insurance industry or in the banking industry, you have to follow these very complicated regulations. And the worry is that if you give these complex regulations to a guessing machine, it's going to guess right most of the time, but wrong a good number of those times, and you don't want to be the person at the other end of that mistake. But if you use theorem provers, you're not going to get the legal equivalent of the blue screen of death. You're going to get the right answers. Why is this important? Like, imagine you're the head of a low-income household. You don't have money to spend for lawyers, but there are legal questions you have to answer. Let's say maybe there's public housing. Maybe there are opportunities for tax credits. Good luck trying to read any description about these. What we're looking to do is creating these applications that convert these codes that are almost impossible for humans to understand into simple applications that not only give them the correct answer, but will also explain why they're the correct answer. That, I feel like, is not only getting the right answer, is really important in responsible AI, but I think it's also what we're owed. That is dignity. Our dignity in part depends on some explanation as why whether the state will let us do something or not. And that's why I'm excited. I'm excited because $80 billion a year is left unclaimed in social benefits because people can't understand the rules. If we could get them to be able to claim that money in a simple way that they could use and they would get the right answer and it would explain to them why it's the right answer, or if they can't get benefits, would also explain to them why they can't get benefits, I think that this would be a very significant step in trying to solve the problem of access to justice in this country, which is a real crisis.
I think the way you've described like how you're preventing hallucinations in your tool, I'm sure it's more complicated than a little bit, but I think like, again, to go back to like OpenAI and ChatGPT, if they could solve their hallucination problem, they would obviously do it. How come they haven't thought to combine the two kinds of AI?
Oh, I'm sure they have thought. They just don't, well, so I've been working on this problem for decades, and so there are very few people who've tried to do this. I tried to do it in the early 1990s, and it turns out you couldn't do it in the early 1990s because technology didn't exist. I think it's really hard to figure out how to convert law into logic. We figured out how to do it. So I think that may be part of it. Number two is, they're like these companies are making money on a certain kind of paradigm. The paradigm is that if we throw enough stuff at these models, they will achieve artificial general intelligence. And I think many people, I'm not alone in this, think that that's actually not possible to just keep on throwing more and more text at something and get it to act like a calculator by pure guessing. The number of reasoning problems are infinite, but the number of patterns that we have are finite. And so I think people, when GPT-5 came out, was it last month or the month beforehand?
Maybe 2 months ago.
Yeah, maybe 2 months ago, yeah. I think people were very disappointed. I thought they were sold a bill of goods that this is going to be what we've all been waiting for. And it turns out, no.
And this is like one of the missions of OpenAI, right? To solve or create AGI.
Yes, yes, it is. I mean, it's good to have goals. I kind of think that this is like a little story. Okay, so I said in the 1990s, I was really interested in doing this, but the technology didn't exist. Why didn't the technology exist? Because everyone wanted to build a theorem prover that solved every logical problem. And it turns out that's a terrible way to do anything. What do I mean? Everyone wants to build a general tool. Everyone wants to build a tool that can apply to anything. Who wants to build a specialized tool when you can build a general tool, right? That's, of course, everyone's inclination, until you realize that the general case is just hard. It's just way too hard to do. And so people started, exactly when I got out of it, like the first time, decided, wait a second, let's not try to build a general theorem prover. Let's just try to solve particular cases. So they started very small. Let's just build theorem provers that can answer like arithmetic questions, just with integers. And let's do arrays and bit vectors and all these things that it doesn't matter what they are, but people just started adding things to these solvers. And they discovered that after 10, 20 years, that, wow, they kind of had like a general tool. But they did it not by trying to get the general tool. They did it by trying to solve particular cases. That's what I would like to do. I would like to try to solve cases within legal reasoning. And then once we do, once we do that, I mean, I don't think we're gonna, I'm gonna complete it, but once that happens, then we can start thinking about healthcare or finance or chemistry or things like that, and then try to stitch those together. I understand the desire to go for the general tool, because if you got the general, you got everything else. Or as they'd say in business, if you got the horizontal technology, you don't need the verticals. The problem is that getting a horizontal technology in AI is too hard because the problems that human beings address are so various that it's unlikely that one model is going to do it all.
This makes sense. I mean, what you're solving is a big problem, but when we compare it to maybe like what OpenAI is promising, it's like a very narrow problem that you're solving. Whereas I feel like what has been promised with the chatbot and ChatGPT is that like you should be able to ask it for legal advice. You should be able to ask it who Leonardo DiCaprio is dating, like, and everything in between there.
Yeah, and if I had wings, I could fly. I mean, yeah, of course they want that. Who wouldn't want that? I mean, it's just that it's not generally within our reach. I mean, in the 1980s and 90s, all the computer scientists wanted to build these general theorem provers, and it didn't work. And it's a story that repeats itself throughout technology.
I mean, perhaps like an unfair comparison, but like the promise of the Theranos machine is that with one drop of blood, it could diagnose a number of issues rather than doing one of those things well. Do you feel like that's kind of the direction a lot of our large AI labs are moving?
Well, so the thing about Theranos is it's one of the largest Silicon Valley frauds. And I would never say that OpenAI is engaged in fraudulent misrepresentation. I really think they believe what they say. I just think it's not realistic to assume it. Now, one of the things you realize is that it's in people's interest to say that their technology can do more than it can.
It's how you raise more money.
Yeah, it's exactly how, well, you can only raise more money if you can promise more. Having said that OpenAI is not going to achieve what I think it thinks it's going to achieve with its technology, I want to say that OpenAI and ChatGPT, I think, is a world historical invention. I think it is brilliant. I think it is amazing that we live in a world that these things exist. I just think that the inflated claims that they've made not only won't be realized, but it's scaring the heck out of us.
I'm gonna ask one more question, and then we'll take questions from the audience. So if you guys have questions, feel free to line up here. I want to go back to the labor question. I guess what can people do to prepare for the potential job loss that AI will bring us, if you believe that's going to happen?
Oh, there's no question that the job loss is going to happen, and it's not going to happen because the AI is going to replace you. They're gonna fire you, and then they're going to put an AI in your place, and it won't work. That's, and then they will hire you back.
For less money.
Yeah, for much less money, part-time, no benefits. So I think this is a real concern because there's just enormous amount of economic pressure always to reduce labor costs, but also when all this money has been sunk into this technology, there's a need to have a return on investment. What about all of us? How should we address it? I understand when people say, oh, I don't want to use this because it's bad for the world. This is dystopian. I understand when people say, I don't want to use this because of climate change. I understand all those things. Those are real concerns. They really are real concerns. On the other hand, if you're not going to invest the time into figuring out how to use this technology, you are not going to be able to participate in giving the market the right signals as to what the right product should be. You need to know what ChatGPT does, so when the discussion comes up in your workplace or with your children, or what, that you know what you're talking about, and that you have some experience with it, because it really isn't going away. And it's not going away not because the technology is so great, though it is really good, but not nearly as good as they say it is. But there's just too much money in it for the world to ignore it. And so either we learn about it now, or you're going to play catch up later on.
I'm just going to ask you one more quick question before we go to the Q&A. If I think you made a really good point about learning, using, trying to understand these tools. I guess, like, where would you recommend going to read about and keep up with AI?
Well, so I do think that the best way to, as I said before, the best way to learn about AI is AI. Okay, which is, like, if you read something and you don't understand what they're saying, just copy and paste it into ChatGPT. Like, that's what I do. I mean, why wouldn't you? I mean, it gives really good answers, and I don't know the answer, so why wouldn't I ask it? I forgot what the question.
Oh, are there, like, it's just like, but where do you do to keep up with, like, do you read the New York Times' coverage?
Oh no, I read. So the most important thing to learn about AI, breaking best commentary, is this publication called The Verge.
Thank you for that. That sounded like I planted that question. But
No, it wasn't. But I do love The Verge. I really do. No, really, I read it all the time. It's really good. There are all these incredibly good things on the, read the New York Times. There's, more insidery things like The Platformer and all these kind of Silicon Valley things. It's fun. It's interesting. I think much more important is that you play with the tools themselves, because they're the more interesting story.
Okay, let's take a question.
Okay. First of all, I'd just like to say thank you to both of you for coming today and for providing all of this information for us. And as you can see, we already have a number of folks lined up here. So if you'd like to ask a question, I encourage you to get in line so you don't miss out. After the question and answer session, we're going to have a book signing over at the table right here. And come on up, folks. If you have a mobility issue coming to the mic, please raise your hand and we'll try to come over and take your question from you and present it here. We are filming this, so we do ask that everybody come up to the mic if possible. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. I will try to be succinct and intelligent in formatting this question. Bear with me. I was listening to a podcast and someone was talking about the regulation of AI being like a hammer. You can't regulate the use, or you can't say a hammer cannot be used for these things because you can't possibly imagine all the use cases. But you can say murder is illegal. So if someone uses a hammer to bludgeon someone versus building a building, like, that's how you catch it. And what I am grappling with, and you used to be at CISA, I'm in the election administration space, is how do you regulate use cases when you can't even really always be sure that AI is being used, right? So if you can't see it, Do you think effective regulation is even possible, or are we looking at an age where we'll have to come up with a new global social contract where social norms will have to regulate because the law cannot? I know you might not have a specific answer, but that's
No, the answer is yes. No, I know. You're asking like such an important and intelligent question, which is, how do you regulate a tool? Because tools can be used for good or bad. But that's like, notice we do that all the time. So take a hammer. We say you can't hit people over the head with a hammer without their consent, maybe even with their consent. We regulate things all the time, and it's true that regulation is, as they say, the law is a ham-fisted instrument. The trick is to do it in a way that enables innovation to proceed while also eliminating the obvious bad cases. Now, that was a very abstract. So I worked in the government for AI ethics, and I'll tell you what we were focused on. What we were focused on was safety and rights impacting. That is, what we wanted to do was go through all the uses of AI in the federal government, identify whether they had AI in them, and whether that AI was rights impacting or safety impacting. So that's what the Biden administration was interested in doing, and that ended when we had a switchover in the administrations, and that's when I left.
Thank you.
Yeah.
A great question.
Yeah, great question. Yeah.
Hi. You stated earlier about AI's impact in helping people discover their legal rights and whatever. I'm looking on the other side of it. Is there an effort out there to go and write the laws by AI? For example, there's probably every jurisdiction has a theft statute and all. And I would surmise that all of those statutes are different. And we can learn from other statutes, and that's where the case law comes in. We have judges saying, okay, this is missing in it, and all. So is there an effort on the way for us to go and have laws which probably are more simplistic, easier to read, and more encompassing than the current ones?
Great question, because I spend my time trying to figure out how to translate legal codes and legal texts. I will say the following thing. One of the things I discovered is that when the text is really simple, it's almost always inconsistent. Like, the crazy thing is that the convoluted syntax of legal codes is kind of necessary in order to make sure that there aren't foul-ups. It just so happens that foul-ups are so common and possible that you have to add all these exceptions, and that's what makes them so difficult to read. People have said to me, if you take legal codes and convert them into logic, maybe the legislatures could use them and they could test their legislation using your tool to see whether it's actually achieving their goal. And I have been a law professor long enough to know what would happen. What will happen? Lobbyists will get hold of the tool. They will figure out how to put in Easter eggs, as they call them, like little tiny things, giveaways, and it'll be very hard for us to spot, but it'll be logically there, and it will be used to trick us. Now, that's bad. But I think that's what would happen. And so my fear is that people will use AI to exploit the law, rather than using it to frame the law in a more simplistic manner. Sorry.
Isn't that what's being done now, even without AI, that the lobbyists come in and change things, even like a comma, so that we see the law in one way and they interpret it as a different way because...
Well, yeah, so there are tricky questions of statutory interpretation, which aligning. I will just say that, like, the people who write the U.S. statutes, their drafting committees in Congress are like, they're geniuses. I don't know how they do it. I mean, they write really, really, really precise code under enormous time pressure. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm
Hi.
Kirsten Rao. I started studying programming in the 70s. My high school class had 3 women, 7 men. Day one, the boys told the girls, get out. They all left. I was the last girl standing. When they couldn't get rid of me, they started letting the air out of my bicycle tires. So they did that for a few weeks until I acted so bored, like it didn't bother me. They finally shrugged and said, all right, I guess she's here. My question is about inherent bias. That's why I told you this little story. Right now, most of the people operating and running and directing billions of dollars into AI fit pretty neatly into kind of some certain specific powerful categories. My concern is that AI is being trained on scraping some of the worst of the internet, which it's not embodied. It didn't grow up riding a bike and have its air, it doesn't feel. So how do we deal with the bias and the repercussions that are being built in? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Now I feel really bad about slashing your tires. I was a kid at the time. So question about why is there bias? Why do people complain about bias in AI models? Well, as you pointed out, if AI models are trained on real-world data, things that people say and people do, because we're not perfect, to say the very least, the training data out there will be a combination of people acting in the right way and people acting in the wrong way. And the AI has no way of knowing which is the right way, which is the wrong way. And this normally happens in what's called post-training. After they train it, then they try to align it, try to get it in alignment with human preferences. One of the things that I think is really fascinating from a sociological point of view is the debates now about what is bias. You know, so when Gemini first came out, which is the large language model from Google, I asked, give me the most beautiful video of the most perfect looking female. And it gave me like obviously, looked like AI, but half of it was black and half of it was white. And so it was an attempt to try to deal with the fact that, like, on the one hand, the pictures of beauty will tend to be in a culture like ours, focused on, let's say, the dominant ethnicity, and therefore it'll present it as if that is what beauty is. And then what the people at Gemini didn't want to do that, so they created this compromise which kind of made no sense, because nobody's half and half. And so how would you remove bias from a large language model? So what the boys did to you, that's clear bias. What about anti-vax? Anti-vax sentiments? What about pro-fascist sentiment? What about misogynistic, anti-trans, let's say anti-Trump, anti-MAGA? Like, how do you assess these? One of the huge problems about dealing with large language models is that we have to make some kind of social assessment about what bias is. And that means that I think we're not going to end up with one model. I feel like we're going to end up with many, many models. There's going to be the progressive model, there's going to be the DSA model, there's going to be the MAGA model, there's going to be the Red Sox model. You know, there are people who have their particular preferences. And I think that's the way a lot of these things are going to work out. If you have one model, then the question what's bias is really hard. But if you have multiple models, you can switch.
That doesn't seem like an ideal outcome either, but.
Oh, I didn't say it was ideal. I just said that I didn't make the world, I'm merely predicting it.
Great. Hi, I'm a computer programmer, right? And I'm sure you commented earlier about how it's coming for hard jobs. And for example, in my field, there's vibe coding, right? And I'm of the age where I'm too young to retire, but not too old to restart my career, all right? And I know we kind of joked about it earlier, saying that our employers would fire us now and then hire us back at lower rates. I mean, I was just kind of hoping you can provide some more practical explanation. Like, that's a joke. I get that you're saying that as a joke, but I'm thinking, can you give some more practical guidance for us to prepare for what's coming next?
Yes.
I kind of think you weren't joking.
Wait, I wasn't joking. I wasn't joking. I was joking in the gallows sense. You know, like, wow, I hope I really hope they sharpened the blade on the guillotine, kind of thing. So this is a big problem. So you use the word vibe coding, right? So people may not know what vibe coding is. Vibe coding was a term made up by Andre
Garcia.
I forgot what the
Chaos Monkeys guy, right?
Yeah, the guy who did GPT-3. Anyway, the point is that you can say to Claude or to Gemini or to ChatGPT, you can say, build me a program that does this, and it will write out the code. And then you can tweak it a little bit if you want, but that's called vibe coding, because it's like you're not doing it on the basis of thinking through the logic. You're doing it on the basis of vibes. And so, of course, everyone's worried that if AI can produce this code, I thought my grandmother told me that I was supposed to be a STEM major because I need to get a tech job. But it turns out that the AI might come for you first. You know, I mean, there's an irony in it, not funny irony, but, you know, the ones who created these tools are the first ones to lose their jobs. I don't know. This is one of the big questions I think people have when it comes to vibe coding and this new world, which is this sustainable? Because as you no doubt know, when you vibe code, you get tons of code. You have no idea what it does. Even if you know how to code in that language, it's just all this stuff and you don't know what it does, and it's not maintainable. And so there's a lot of people who think, oh, let's just fire our junior software engineers and just use Claude Code. I'm not sure that that's the case, because it's not clear to me that industry wants code that can't be maintained. Let me just make a general claim about this world. Shafi Goldwasser, who won the Turing Award, which is like the Nobel Prize for computer science, I was talking to her and she said to me, the future is checking. The future is checking. And what did she mean? What she meant is, in a world in which it's so easy to generate code, text, pictures, whatever, the main effort's going to be in checking whether it's correct. And therefore, if I was doing software engineering, I would really want to move into verification to test whether code is correct, because the future is checking.
All right, thank you.
Cool, we're gonna try to move through these questions a little quickly.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a similar question about, like, I think you said your tool for helping explain the law works on connectionist model and then also the symbolic model. And the connectionist, that's like the chat GPT, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Like that, right.
So I've used that like for coding, like with Claude Code, for example. And like you're saying, it creates code, but sometimes it hallucinates or it's not right. Sometimes it has errors and it doesn't do exactly what you say. So how are you using the connectionist to create the code that then you feed to the rules that then you feed to the symbolic? I understand the symbolic would be like perfect, but creating the symbols from the I think you understand what I'm saying, but when you go from like
So I just say, so there are things called guardrails,
yeah.
which are rules that check the outputs of LLMs to make sure they don't violate something.
Okay.
And that's the way in which checking happens now. And I imagine will happen with vibe coding.
But like for your tool, how do you make sure that it doesn't hallucinate for the first step since you're using the
Yeah, so there's 8 zillion things that we do to check because the future is checking. For me, it's the present. But we always also have a human check it just because I'm anxious. Thank you.
Well, thanks for sharing your knowledge. As a lifelong photographer, what we do is we copyright our images, like every 6 months or so, we send to the copyright office. How does that affect AI?
I mean, it's enormous.
Can you copyright something that you create in AI?
So the Copyright Office has said that any type of output of a large language model or a large visual model is not copyrightable. Okay, so that's the first thing. But the main issue is, what about all the text and images that the LLM has been trained on?
Yeah.
Does that violate copyright? And that's a very complex question.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to get through.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get things quickly.
Thank you for your explanation of AI. I wanted to ask, one of the things that we haven't really touched upon so far is the privacy element. I mean, AI, as I understand, is training on a lot of different data, including things which we submit. How is that being protected? And if it's not, is there a way for us to protect personally identifiable information?
Yeah, so, right, like, it's trained on that stuff. And people get really angry when it shows up, and you can write to them. It's a real problem. It's a real problem. Hackers, just one. Well, if I have time afterwards, I'll say, kind of like. But yeah, it's an enormous problem which hasn't been solved.
Yeah, there really are no ways to protect ourselves from that at the current moment.
Yes.
Good afternoon. My question is, you suggest people use ChatGPT to explain what ChatGPT is. What happens if it gives a hallucinatory answer during that explanation?
Yeah, so what happens is that I'll say, I thought you said this. Or I'll say, this doesn't make sense. And, 9 out of 10 times, no, it made sense, I just didn't see it. Just like you would ask your professor, you'd say, I don't understand, this doesn't make sense. And then, but it's pretty good when you present it reasons to change its mind, it will. And so it's really good for us who were trained how to think. And this will sound like a joke, but I don't mean it as a joke. I really worry about people, students in high school now, who don't have to synthesize large amounts of information into a 3-page document because they can just write a prompt. That to me is really, really, really scary. So what I would say is I'm not afraid about hallucinations on these things because I argue with it.
Thank you.
Hi, I have a very practical question. When everyone's talking about AI, they generally always say ChatGPT. Is ChatGPT of the AI world the Kleenex of the tissue world?
Yes.
And is
Thank you.
there,
That's a great way to put it, yes.
and is there a difference between Claude, Gemini, and ChatGPT?
There are, yes, these are, this is fantastic.
Those
question.
aren't the only three either.
I'm sorry?
Those aren't the only three models.
Yeah, right, exactly. So there's Grok, there's the whole family, the meta family of Llama, which is what we use because we can't use OpenAI. I can't use OpenAI for client data. So I have to download it to the Yale infrastructure.
Wait, why can't you use it?
Oh, because it's confidential. You can't give confidential things to a commercial.
Sorry, so you have your own base of Llama.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we download our own large language models. Gemini, Claude, and ChatGPT, they all have their different personalities, and they're all good at certain things and not so good at others. Like Claude, I think, is the best writer. I think Gemini is like the fastest, but Gemini was kind of trained to say it doesn't know a lot of instances, so sometimes it's less useful because it's more cautious. And OpenAI, for me, works the best for the kinds of things that I do. But they all are trained in different ways. They have different regimes, and they're good for different things. So I would try a bunch of them. And within the family, there are all these different kinds as well.
What is Grok good for?
I don't use Grok. Grok is really good when you don't understand a tweet on Twitter and somebody says, Grok explain, and it will explain the meme to you. I find that really good.
Hello, thank you very much. My question is regarding the AI hallucination and whether if we created a governance framework consisting of verifiable input data provenance along with certified model integrity and auditable decision record, whether this helps us in grounding the AI to lessen its chance of hallucination and creating an auditable trail to kind of mitigate the problems.
Yeah, the part of the problem, and this is one of the things that really seeing is believing. So, you know how people often say that LLMs are black boxes. They are unexplainable. Their reasoning cannot be followed. What do they mean by that? What they mean is if you look at a large language model and you just print it out, it'll just be a string of decimal numbers. And you'd be like, what? What is that? And then the model that gave you a bad result, you're like, what happened here? And then you'll like print it out and it'll be like a different set of numbers. And you'll be like, why did this one make the misogynistic joke and the other one didn't? Like there's no way to know, and there's a lot of work being done in computer science to try to trace it. Right now, I think that the problem is not model integrity. The problem is that guessing is just really chaotic and unpredictable. And the governance regime, I don't think is going to solve the technological limitations of connectionist AI.
It also means trusting that governance, right?
Yeah, right. You do, right. So, I mean, because I of course, I would get all the time things from, the big tech companies. Will you sign this letter? Will you do this amicus brief? Will you be part of this global treaty? And I'm like, no, I'm not going to be global treaty with like Microsoft or Google. I mean, this is what we call in legal theory and political science. We call this capture, where the people that you're trying to regulate get control over the regulatory mechanism. And so I mean,
I know this is sort of an extreme example, but Elon Musk has famously, called Wikipedia Wokepedia because it won't list him as the founder of Tesla, which is factually untrue. I think you can give him a lot of credit for making that company what it was, but he did not found it. Like, he bought it. And so you see him threatening to make his own version of Wikipedia where the facts bend to his reality, and that's what he wants to train his large language model on. And I don't think everyone has the same incentives as Elon Musk, but each one of these companies has different incentives. Our government has different incentives.
Yeah, all these things. I mean, when I said Microsoft, Google, I don't trust them, it's not like I trust the government.
You used to work there. I mean,
yeah, right, yeah. Can I just say one thing? Having worked in the government, I've never worked with a bunch of more serious, conscientious people who really wanted to make our lives safer. And the demonization and the destruction of our state capacity, I think, is awful.
Okay, last question.
Good afternoon. I wanted to go back to that question of bias that was asked a few moments ago and bring it, in fact, to a global level, because these models that we are speaking about have been trained on English documents, English language documents. So I can imagine that the LLM in Beijing is trained on Chinese documents. They are not translated one way or the other, and either the European Union will choose another language than English for training. What is the result of that? Is each LLM trained on a different language?
Sapir-Whorf hypothesis.
What?
Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. It's like that the language you learn actually determines
the Whorf, right. I'm sorry, right, yeah, of course, right. Yeah, so I would say the following. These large language models are not trained on one language, because there's not enough of one language. They're trained on many, many languages, and I know people who work on training large language models for small African languages, right? Because they don't have websites that you can kind of train on, so they go and they try to develop databases for that. But obviously, what aligns with the Chinese government is going to be very different than what aligns with the US government. The only thing I would just say is right now there's so much money here that it's not great to limit your base to people who speak only one language or only one ideology. You want to capture everything.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks very much. We have a 30-minute break. We have a cafe in the corner, and we hope we see you all at 2 o'clock. Thank you.